So, whatever happened to that unbelievably bizarre and somewhat disturbing 1962 sci-fi horror film, The Brain That Wouldn't Die? Let's find out. Movies,
Music and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here, talking about movies, music, and monsters. Yeah, I know, my wife and I are currently on vacation in London, and I said I wasn't gonna put up any new content while we were gone, but I just appreciate you guys way too much, so I thought we would jump into the Halloween season a little bit early with this horrifically strange 1962 black and white creature feature, The Brain That Wouldn't Die. I remember seeing this movie late at night, alone, in the dark, probably when I was about 7. I was always one of those kids with an overly active imagination who just knew, without a doubt, that monster dogs with red glowing eyes lived in the forest out behind my house, and that monsters were absolutely living underneath my bed, or worse, in the freaking closet, which, no joke, seriously freaked me out as a kid and honestly still does. That being said, I freaking love this film. So grab your favorite psychopathic mad doctor with delusions of godhood and a bucket of stale popcorn, and let's head in. Get it? Head in. The Brain That Wouldn't Die, which was also known as The Head That Wouldn't Die, is a 1962 American sci-fi horror film written and directed by Joseph Green alongside screenwriter Rex Carlton. The film was actually completed way earlier, like back in 1959, under the working title of The Black Door, but wasn't theatrically released until 1962 as a double feature with Invasion of the Star Creatures. Now, for those of you who have never experienced the outlandish weirdness of this film, it's basically the story of an unorthodox mad doctor, Dr. Bill Cordner, obsessed with keeping human body parts alive, some successful, some not so much, whose fiancée, Jan, gets in a horrific car wreck which, yes, you guessed it, decapitates her. The doctor recovers the severed head, takes it back to his creepy secret basement laboratory where he and his Igor-like crippled assistant Kurt somehow manage to revive the head with hopes of finding his lifelong love a new, perfect body. And then there's the thing in the closet. Okay, we'll get to that later. Stories about mad doctors keeping human heads alive wasn't certainly unique to this film. Prior to The Brain That Wouldn't Die was Professor Dowell's Head from 1925, and also the West German horror film The Head from 1959. The film starred Jason Evers as the evil mad Dr. Bill Cordner, the beautiful Virginia Leith as his decapitated fiancée Jan, Bruce Brighton as Bill Cordner's father, Anthony LaPena as the assistant Kurt, who was oddly credited as Leslie Daniel in the film, and finally Eddie Carmel as the infamous monster in the closet. You know, the odds of you getting into a really bad accident, being decapitated, and having your head resurrected is approximately 947 trillion to 1. But the odds of your information getting hacked is about 1 in 4. So I'd literally like to take just 1 minute to talk about today's sponsor, Aura. A United Healthcare CEO recently claimed that maybe 1/3 of all U.S. citizens were affected by a recent hack. There are data brokers online who literally sell your personal information. Try it for yourself. Go to Google, put in your name, and you might be shocked to find out how much of your personal information is literally just floating around out there. They showed me who was selling my information and automatically submitted opt-out requests, which is pretty cool. I also get top-notch antivirus, a VPN, identity theft protection, all in one place for a very reasonable price. So if you want to find out what's going on with your personal information and you want to give it a try, go to aura.com/Dan Monroe to start a free 2-week trial. Link in the description. And now, back to the brain that wouldn't die. Production for this very low-budget film began in 1959, being independently shot and produced around Tarrytown, New York, with producer Rex Carlton originally calling the film I Was a Teenage Brain Surgeon, which sort of fit into the familiar mold of other popular films in the day, like I Was a Teenage Werewolf. How low budget? Well, low enough that you don't have the funds to actually show a real car crash. But with creative editing and camera angles, you can certainly give the audience the idea that a car has crashed without actually having to show it. Creative, old-school, real-world practical filmmaking. I freaking love it. After literally only 13 days of filming, the title was then later changed to The Head That Wouldn't Die, but there were some prints of the film that had The Brain That Wouldn't Die in the opening title and The Head That Wouldn't Die in the closing title. Not sure why. Somebody on the production team obviously didn't have their head on straight. Kind of weird. Apparently, Virginia Leith, who played the disembodied head, was so dissatisfied with the final film that she straight out refused to return for any pickup shots in post-production. Therefore, a few of her lines were actually dubbed in her absence by actress Doris Brent, who was one of the nurses in the film. The sets for this film were constructed literally in the basement of a New York hotel. And then there's the monster in the closet. My God. Spoiler alert. There's a monster in the closet which just happens to be the combination of failed experiments by the mad doctor combined into one hideous-looking thing that lives in a closet. That unbelievably gruesome scene where the monster at the end grabs the guy by the arm, rips it off, and he goes sliding down the wall with the blood on his... This super gruesome whatever it is in his very first cinematic role was played by Eddie Carmel, a well-known Palestine-born circus performer who worked under the name the Jewish Giant. The Brain That Wouldn't Die was released theatrically on August 10th, 1962, to basically not all that great reviews, but remember, it wasn't intended to be some large Hollywood blockbuster, just your standard Saturday afternoon campy thriller designed to basically just keep audiences in their seat for an hour and a half. Film critic Leonard Maltin awarded the film 1.5 out of 4 stars, calling it poorly produced. Really, Leonard? Did you know that this film had a budget of about $1.95? Brian J. Dillard from AllMovie.com, however, called the film a hokey yet fun creature feature which still, to this day, commands a sizable following on the basis of its over-the-top low-grade special effects and pseudo-psychological soliloquies. pseudo-psychological soliloquies. Who talks like that? Well, the brain that wouldn't die came, and the brain that wouldn't die went, and believe it or not, that certainly was not the end of this super creepy creature feature, I can tell you that. There was, of course, the musical. Yeah, I know, right? The musical called The Brain That Wouldn't Die in 3D that premiered at the New York Musical Theater Festival in October of 2011. And then, a few years later, another musical. Hollywood screenwriter Bruce Bernhardt adapted the script, creating a completely new score for the world premiere of The Brain That Wouldn't Die, the musical, opening at the Footlight Players Theater in Charleston, South Carolina in October 2016. This is really kind of cool in 2020, particularly due to a successful Kickstarter campaign. A new satirical remake was created and directed by Derek Carl and premiered at the Portland Horror Film Festival, being nearly a shot-by-shot remake of the original. I checked it out. It's fun, campy, but to me doesn't quite have the gripping black and white, soul that the original had. The 1985 film Reanimator, starring Jeffrey Combs, certainly paid tribute to this film in its third act as we see Dr. Carl Hill's disembodied head looking very familiar to Jan's head from The Brain That Wouldn't Die. In 1984, there was a song produced called The Brain That Wouldn't Die by a New Zealand band called Tall Dwarfs on an EP called Slug Bucket Hairy Breath Monster. So yeah, there's that. I'm really not sure whether this is coincidentally bizarre or just an interesting fact, but when actress Virginia Leith passed away, her body was donated to the medical science department at the UCLA Medical School. I wonder if they never mind. A special edition release of the film was released in 2002 by Synapse Films from an original uncut 35mm print, which contained additional footage of the stripper cat fight, as well as a little more extra gore. In December 2015, Shout Factory released a beautifully remastered Blu-ray edition of the uncut film, now in glorious high definition and transferred from the original negative. But, and this is really super interesting, the film ended up in the public domain immediately from the day it was released, like back in 1962, due to the fact that somebody simply screwed up the copyright notices. So that means you can watch the entire film in high definition, like right here in this place. The Brain That Wouldn't Die was certainly never meant to be anything other than what it was, a simple, low-budget creature feature. But if you've never seen this film, take a look at it. Don't expect much. Shut your brain off and enjoy it for what it is, a super fun, slightly disturbing, classic 1960s sci-fi horror film that, despite its flaws, is still remembered and loved to this day, paving the way for other great sci-fi mad scientist sci-fi horror classics like Die Monster Die, I Monster, The Creeping Flesh, Nothing But the Night, The Unbelievably Fantastic Reanimator, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that retrospective on The Brain That Wouldn't Die, and if you did, and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new stuff coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. And please feel free to stop back anytime as we together continue our conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.